First of all, welcome to our concert tonight. I'm James Bass, and this is Surround Sound. The concept of this concert is really to allow us as listeners and consumers of the choral art form to experience it as close as we can, we think, to the way that some of these composers intended these pieces to be performed at their very beginning, which was utilizing the spatial elements of some of these incredibly diverse and large cathedrals. And to just talk a little bit globally about what that may mean or feel. You know, in our modern day, we have HD TV. If you've been to a theater lately, I know in Los Angeles we now have XD theaters. Do you know what XD is? So it's, in addition to having the enormous screen and high definition, your seat might shake when there's a crash or a bomb in the movie, or if there is a lightning strike in the movie, there's a flash of light in the hall. So they actually are doing multi-dimensional, sensational kind of effects. Well, the music that you're going to hear tonight is as close to that as they had in the 16th and 17th century. There was also a rhetorical or religious reason for this. You think about what an average person in Seville, Spain, or in Venice, an average person, their domicile may not be very large, it may not be spacious, may not be made out of grand materials, but when they come into the cathedral, you're in an altered state. And the music being performed in a way in which maybe you couldn't see it, or it's coming from many different directions, was a composer's way of trying to emulate what they thought heaven might sound like. So you're actually going into a musical, elevated place by using the space. So that's what we really mean by surround sound today, and you will in fact be surrounded several times in this concert. So don't be alarmed. There's a lot of movement in this concert. It's all intentional, and I certainly hope that it has the desired effect with you all as listeners tonight. So with that as kind of the general concept of our concert, I'd like to go through the pieces and talk to you a little bit about their origins, their history, and some insight on how we're performing them tonight. Our concert begins essentially in Spain. We're going to do several pieces that come from Spanish music tradition. The first two works are from essentially Catalonia, and both of these works were found in a book called the Llibre Vermell de Montserrat. I'm sure you all have one of these on your shelves, which means the Red Book. And the only reason it's called the Red Book is because when they originally compiled it in 1399, they put a red binding on it. And so it just became known as the Red Book. Well, this book has a collection of many things, religious poems, visual imagery, and then there's an entire section, several sections of musical entries. All of the musical entries are anonymous, and most of them, we believe, musicologists believe, were actually just transcribed later from oral tradition of music that was sung and performed by pilgrims on the Camino de Santiago. Have you ever heard of the Camino de Santiago? For Christians, it's one of the most important pilgrimages in the world. There are several different paths that you can take on the Camino de Santiago, but the most common and most famous one is one that starts on the south coast of France, on the Mediterranean, and then you walk across the entire length of the north side of Spain until you get to the Cathedral of St. James, and where his remains are, and that's where you would technically end your pilgrimage, but many pilgrims would then go from there and walk another 2 days over to a place called Finisterre. Finisterre is just a little peninsula of land that sticks out into the Atlantic Ocean, and Finisterre technically means the end of the earth. And for the folks in 1399 and before, they didn't know that there was anything on the other side of this ocean, so it was the end of the earth. These pilgrims would start in the Mediterranean, and many of them, as became a tradition, would collect a scallop shell from the Mediterranean, and they would wear it or have it on their person. And that was the symbol to anyone that came along to say, hey, I'm okay to be in this kingdom because I'm on a pilgrimage. Here's my seashell. And then once they would get to the end of their pilgrimage, they would make their veneration of St. James, they'd go to Finisterre, and they would throw the seashell into the Atlantic. So it was a fascinating thing. Well, along this, that's a good loud phone, my goodness, that's really good. As these pilgrims would gather, it would be people from all around Europe. They wouldn't necessarily know each other, and so just like us, if we were kind of on a camping trip with people, you sit around a fire and you sing songs, or you sing songs while you're walking. So the first two pieces tonight, we believe, are some of that kind of music. The first one, you're going to hear 3 sopranos stationed throughout the building, and they're actually singing the exact same music, but offset by 1 bar. So it's a canon, but it's an unbelievably beautiful medieval canon, which we believe they organized it this way to create this otherworldly effect. The second piece is called Stella Splendens, and it's going to begin with a kind of a jaunty tune from our instrumental group. It actually sounds like something that pirates would be singing. It's kind of a pirate song. And one singer will be the person that kind of orates the initial words and songs, and then you're going to hear in response all of the pilgrims. The pilgrims will then respond, and you're going to actually see a pilgrimage right here in this church tonight as we sing this music from before 1399. From there, we will go to a set of music, 2 pieces, from the great Spanish Renaissance tradition, and specifically centered around the Cathedral of Seville in Sevilla. Has anyone ever been to that cathedral? It's enormous. It is an enormous cathedral. You could set this church inside that cathedral probably 25, 30 times. It's 12 football fields wide. It's an enormous square. It's a very different shape than a lot of the cathedrals in Europe. And inside, I was able to visit the cathedral a few years back, and inside that enormous rectangle is another rectangle. And that rectangle has beautiful iron gates, and inside that's where the musicians and some of the priests would be. The altar is up front, but there would be this central location. It was closed. You can't go in that part. You can visit the rest of the cathedral. But when I was there, I asked the music priest, I said, I see that there are constructed these permanent choir seats, and a lot of cathedrals have that, would be for their professional choir. There are 42 seats. And so I asked the priest, I said, this is a lot more seats than I've seen in most cathedrals. Was that for the deacons, or were there extra clergy that would sit here? He said, no, during the time of Tomás Luis de Victoria, we had 42 professional singers in the choir. That's 3 times the size of Seraphic Fire. So they had wonderful resources available to them, and of course they had this enormous space. So what do? You make surround sound. So the first of this Seville tradition is an Agnus Dei setting, and you'll hear 2 choirs back and forth as we sing this beautiful work by Tomás Luis de Victoria. The second piece is called the Duo Seraphim, but it actually has 3 choirs, not 2. There are 3 choirs, and it's by a composer named Francisco Guerrero, who died in 1599. He studied in Seville. He was at the Cathedral of Seville. He was a student of another famous musician called Cristobal Morales, who was also at Seville. They had this amazing tradition of musicians. We know that Guerrero was very influential, even though, how many of you have heard of Francisco Guerrero before? A musicologist, another musicologist, a doctor. It's not a name that you know as much, even those of you that are studied listeners, but we know that he had an enormous effect on the move towards functional harmony, or harmonies that had a regular progression to certain chords. His music was found as far away as the cathedral in Lima, Peru. And in that day, to get from Seville, Spain to Lima, Peru was a big trip. It was misattributed for many, many years, and then they realized it was the music of Guerrero. So either he went there, which we're not sure he did or didn't, but we know his music made it. So it must have been somewhat popular and influential. After we leave those two works, we will leave Spain permanently for this concert. And then we're going to go to a set of a cappella music that represents really interesting and different styles. The first piece needs some explanation. It's called Immortal Bach, and it's actually a construction, a piece, an arrangement. I don't know what you really call this thing, but it was by the now late Scandinavian Norwegian composer Knut Nystedt. And the notes that we're going to sing first is a short chorale tune by Bach called Komm süßer Tod, or Come Sweet Death. It lasts 22 seconds. The piece is 5.5 minutes. So what happens next is that all of the singers that you're going to see here and here today, we've already been pre-assigned a number, 1, 2, 3, or 4, as the composer, Knut Nystedt, indicates. Did I turn it off? There we go, okay. And so once we've sung the Bach chorale tune exactly as Bach has written, we're going to go back to the first note of the Bach chorale tune, and we will hold it. We just sing that note, all of us together. And then Patrick will indicate at a certain time a number. If your number is called, it means you are now allowed to move to the next note that you have written in your part. However, you are to sing it in the length or time value that you want. Where normally we are restricted as singers to perform in the time value that we are provided, this is one where if you'd like to sing it 10 seconds, you can sing it 10. If you want to sing it 4, you can sing it 4. So what you get orally is what might look like if you saw watercolor paint running into each other, right? You now, instead of defined lines and single colors, you get different shades and blurred lines. Patrick has added an additional element to our performance of this piece today that I think is actually really effective, which is that at a certain point in the piece, once your number is called, you will also physically move. So you're going to get a chance to see, as the notes are changing, people moving. So you're going to see the music actually activating. This music, for those of you that are interested, is called aleatoric music, or aleatoricism, which means music by chance. Every single time the piece is performed, it will be different, because every singer will make a different decision. I'd be very interested to hear what you think about that after our concert tonight. From there, we'll go to a work that's actually fairly solid choral canon. It's a work by Benjamin Britten, the great 20th century English composer, and it's his setting called A Hymn to the Virgin. There are two choirs, and they are offset in space, but in addition to that, Britten essentially writes one big melodic line that he just separates between the choirs, but the choirs are singing in two different languages. So you're going to hear this very unique back and forth of a single melody and a single harmonic line, but with different language, different words. From there, we'll go to a piece for two choirs by the living composer Caroline Shaw. She is a rock star in our musical world. You're going to hear some more of her music next year in our season. I'm very excited about that. This piece is called And the Swallow. It's a setting of a part of a line from Psalm 84. And in the psalm, it discusses a sparrow and a swallow that come together to find refuge, to find a place to live, and essentially build a family. This is what's in the psalm. Carolyn said she was drawn to this text right after the emergence of the Syrian refugee crisis. And she said she likened those refugees as to the sparrow and the swallow trying to come together, people that didn't even know each other, on the street, on the road, trying to find a place to live. So there is a second meaning, an urtext in it. It's also just a really beautiful and effective work. All right, and then from there, we go to what is essentially our last big set of music, and the entire set is by one composer, Claudio Monteverdi. So we will have left Spain, had a short trip to Norway, United States, and England, and then we end up in Italy. Actually, technically, Venice. At the time he was there, Venice was its own state. So there are two movements that we're going to perform that come from a larger work that we've performed many times, the Vespers of the Blessed Virgin. This was a monumental work of the day, and it was a monumental work in the life of Claudio Monteverdi. It was published in 1610. He took several years to kind of compile it and write it. We're not sure that it was actually performed until maybe 1613, which is when he was named as the choir master at the Cathedral de San Marco in Venice, or St. Mark's. Has anybody been in that cathedral? It's a much smaller cathedral than the cathedral in Seville, but it's much more ornate, has lots of little recesses and second-story balconies and little side chapels. We know that Monteverdi used those side chapels and spaces in his musical renderings in the services because he wrote it down in his score, where he would like, lute and singer move to side chapel. So we know that he had them moving around. We weren't just guessing about that part, at least. So the first piece we're going to sing from the Vespers is the Domine adjuvandum me, which is the very opening movement of the Vespers. So have you ever heard this movement? If you haven't, you're going to be a little shocked when we get to it, because for the first 2.5 minutes of it, the choir only sings one chord. We sing the same chord over and over and over and over again, D major. We change words, but we do not change notes at all. This seems so odd, doesn't it? Why are we just singing a D major chord? There are little instrumental ritornelli in between, and there's an important instrumental part happening at the same time. The instrumental part is actually music from a piece he wrote prior called Orfeo, which is now known as a very famous opera from that period. Monteverdi was instrumental in the emergence and the creation of the form of opera, and so he uses some of the instrumental music from the opera, which is very active, but the choir only sings one chord. Let me set the stage for you as to why I think this is the case. Imagine you're at San Marco, and it's one of the great or big feast days for the Virgin Mary. So this is the Vespers before that. This is a big feast day, meaning all the major clergy are going to be there, all of the important musicians will be there. And where do you start the Vespers? At the back of the church. You come in and process down the nave. It's a lot easier to walk and process when you only have to sing one note. And the instrumental group, they're up there. They can play all the notes they want. They don't have to walk. So tonight, we're not going to be processing for that, but just imagine us walking slowly through the nave of the church, and we finally arrive at the front, and then we sing the Alleluias, where the notes now change. So I think it's just a processional piece for the beginning of this piece. I'll tell you about the second one from the Vespers as well right now, the Ave Maris Stella, which is the second of the two pieces from the Vespers. This is a beautiful, slow-moving, the first and last part are very slow-moving, expansive, and extremely type of profound-sounding music. Ave Maris Stella, what does this mean? Ave essentially just means hail or star of the sea. Why is the Virgin Mary a star of the sea? I don't know that she had scuba gear. Like, why is an enormous hymn to the star of the sea about the Virgin Mary? It's an interesting double meaning here. Venice is also called the star of the sea, the city of Venice, because it is in the sea, literally. And the Venetians fancied themselves as elevated, and the patron saint, the Virgin Mary, she must also be elevated as a star of the sea, since she was there spiritually among them. So they're singing about not only the Virgin Mary, they're singing about themselves. Look at us, we are the star of the sea, us Venetians. In the Ave Maris Stella, very unique piece in the fact that it has multiple vocal ensembles in multiple locations. In fact, for our performance today, you'll hear 5 different vocal groups in 5 different spots of the church as the Ave Maris Stella presents itself. Okay, then backing up a little bit, the Beatus Vir is the first of 2 enormous motets written by Monteverdi. What is a motet? What is a madrigal? You've heard of a madrigal, right? A motet and a madrigal in the musical formal structure is exactly the same. There's just one major difference. A madrigal is secular. It has secular text. A motet is sacred. They can be a cappella, they can have instruments, they can be 2 minutes, they can be 20 minutes. It doesn't matter. It's the only rule about a motet and a madrigal is a very specific one, and it is what creates the musical form. For every new line of text that you set, you must have new and different music. So think about this for a second. If you sing different words on different lines, and it's the same music each time, that's essentially what we refer to as strophic. The best example of that is in the pews. Your hymn book. You sing verse 1, 2, 3, and 4. The music's the same every time. The words are different. This is the exact opposite. For every new verse, you'd have to have different music. If the words come back, then the music that was originally coupled with those words, it must also come back. So in this Beatus Vir, you're going to hear a little tag, Beatus, Beatus Vir. Every time that word comes back, you have to hear that melody. But every other line is set dramatically. And this one and the Dixit Dominus, which is the last piece that we sing on this program, are enormous motets. They're extensive, they're long. In the Dixit Dominus, there's such a dramatic text. If you look about it, it talks about crushing the heads of your enemies. And there's even a moment in the music where Monteverdi writes an imitation with text that sounds like people being struck. And then the entire line finally comes together, and the last word is kaput, which means they are gone. So he's text painting through all of these beautiful and extremely amazing motets. There's another beautiful work in the middle of this, Iste Confessor. You'll hear our sopranos sing this. But the last thing I want to share with you is about this last little set of music, Iste Confessor, the Dixit Dominus. They come from a collection of works that Monteverdi published in 1640 and 41 called the Selve Morale et Spirituale. Anybody know what that means? Selve Morale et Spirituale. It's a very peculiar thing. It says, the moral and spiritual forest. What in the heck is that? Well, if we look in the contents of this collection for a hint as to what this means, it's essentially an old man. He was 74 at the time, which for them was old, not for us. But 74 back then was past lifespan expectancy. And if you remember back, I told you that the Vespers was published in 1610, and he was a fully fledged adult working musician at that point. This is 31 years later. He publishes this enormous set of all sacred music, but the music is extremely varied. Monteverdi blurred the lines between what you, in the day, would have thought of as church music. I told you he wrote a lot of opera. He started to mix the sounds you might hear in the theater with the sounds you might hear in the church. Venetians encouraged it. Now, if you went to stuffy old England in this day, you would not be able to do that. But he took music that would be considered, I think even to this day, as very sensual sounding music, but put religious words to them. So this set, the moral and spiritual forest, as you look at all the pieces that are in it, it's enormous. It's as if you're navigating a forest. Sometimes it's extremely dense, and sometimes there's an open glade. Sometimes it's dark and oppressive. Sometimes the light is shining. It's the entire spectrum you might feel as a moral person. All of the ups and the downs exist in the music of this enormous collection. And we're going to share 2 of those, a very bright and sunny Iste Confessor, and a very dramatic and religiously accusatory work, the Dixit Dominus. So that's all the pieces, that's all the music, that's all the concepts on this program. I really appreciate you letting me have a little time to share with you about this music. It's a lot of effort. And if there anyone that has a question, we have time for just a couple questions right now. There was a lot of information. Yes?
So, like, I was in madrigals in high school, but I didn't know what they were. So thank you. I didn't know that I was just thinking of the Silver Swan and how
That's right.
in the
Orlando
there would not be like an ABA structure in a madrigal.
There can be an ABA structure if the text repeats.
Oh, but only
If
any new text
have to have different music. So if you have the Silver Swan and that has this kind of music, and then you have is going to the stream, has to have new music, is going to eat a fish, has to have different music, and is looking for a nest, different music, and then the Silver Swan comes back, then it's the music you heard at the beginning. So it could be A, B, and A if the text is repeated that way.
But in general, all the music would be different.
All of
the
it.
words are different.
Yes.
That's interesting.
That's-
And so the motet's the same thing, but it's sacred.
All sacred, that's right.
Okay.
That's exactly right. You got it. Yes?
Dr. Bass, just thank you and congratulations on an exceptional season this past season and the one coming up. Yesterday, I was privileged to buy the next season, got my tickets. Thank you. So my question is, for last season, this season, exceptional coming up again. My question is, how do you take a millennia of music and bring that down to a 90-minute program? So like these 7 pieces are
Yeah.
so going.
That's programming is always tricky, and programming in a commercial setting, like we don't survive if you don't show up, and you don't show up if you don't enjoy it, right? So there is an axiom here. A millennium of music can be daunting to choose from, and I think of programming, at least for me, is the long game. You're not going to experience everything in every concert. You can't. But what is the most sensational thing about whatever it is you're dialing in on that program? That's what I want you to feel. And then if you come back to the next program, you're going to feel something different. You may feel as much, but a different sensation. And so over the course of a year, I want to have something that makes you cry, something that makes you laugh, something that makes you question, why am I here? Something that makes you nostalgic. I want that those don't all have to be on the same program, but we need to experience them over the season. That way, if you take the full journey with us, then you're going to get, like, for example, next year, dramatic, sorrowful music in our first concert and very kind of introverted music, to then sitting in a jazz club and hearing Nat King Cole songs, which can be just as compelling as a Monteverdi work, if sung and performed in a way that's as close to honest as you possibly can. So for me, I always think about what are we getting in the entire year? If we did Monteverdi on every concert for the year, every concert would be great. But over the course of the year, you're like, can I please hear something else? So this is the flexibility, too, of this amazing ensemble, is that we can do those other things. There are limits with 13 singers. We can't do Carmina Burana every week. I can't tell you how many times I've walked out of a program and someone goes, when are you going to do Carmina? I'm like, well, when we get 90 more singers, we'll do Carmina, or a version of it anyway. Any other questions before we wrap up? Well, thank you so much for coming early and spending a little extra time, and I hope you enjoy the concert. Thank you.